Hello everyone, welcome to React development tutorial. In this tutorial we will talk about debugging. During the development process we definitely need to debug our code. So we need some tools to be able to add some breaking points somewhere inside of the code, so whenever we execute that line of code we get the info and we watch that code and we should be able to debug it. So that's the necessary step that we need to take. So in this tutorial we will learn Chrome DevTools, which is very powerful, and we'll get familiar with most of the tabs that we have in Chrome and the tabs that you usually use during the development. And these are elements, console, source, network, and application. In the tutorials that we talked before for React, we mostly talked about console and Redux, and in this tutorial we will expand it to the tabs that I listed here, and also we'll get the Chrome React extension, and it adds the components tab, and we'll talk about that extension as well. So let's do it. Okay, for debugging purpose I use the application that we built so far, and I'll try to debug the code using this application. In order to open the DevTools, you can just right click here and then go to inspect, and it will open up the DevTools for you. So mostly we use this tab, console tab here before, and you're familiar with that tab already, but we have other tabs here. As you can see, elements, I'll talk about source and network and application, and at the end Redux and components. So these are the tabs that I was talking. And in console, as you can see, we had this view that we added some console log, if you remember, in the previous application. If you have not watched it, I would highly suggest that you go and watch the tutorial again, the previous tutorials. As you can see, as soon as I refresh the page, we added some console log in the code that it shows up here. But you also have some command line tool here that it can execute any kind of JavaScript code that you have. For example, if I want to do some calculations, it uses vanilla JavaScript. It should be purely JavaScript. It cannot be React code, it cannot be TypeScript, it should be purely JavaScript. So for example, for defining that variable, you should use var, and I said a equals an empty array, and then I say a dot push, and I will push some stuff inside of this array via this console. And if I copy a again, you'll see that the result, it shows me the empty array that I defined here. So this console is very powerful, and you can use any calculation for even the complicated ones that you want to test. So sometimes I use this part for my calculations if I want to see what is the expected, because it also shows the local variable as well. So for example, in here I will have window, which is a local variable for this application, and I can check what is the location of the application here, and I can simply say window dot location, local storage, or oh yeah, here it is, location, and it will give me the location of application. As you can see, it gives me the same location that I have right on top of the page, localhost 3001. So you can print out any local variable that you defined in your application, and you have it available here as well. So that's the beauty of the console. And again, you can add the console log to your application and just get that console log back inside of this tab. So remember this tab, this is very important tab. The other thing that is very important, you can clear the stuff that you have in the console with this button, and you can monitor or filter the type of console that you get for this console. So you can just filter by these types. So if I just filter the warnings every time that currently see if I remove the warnings. Now if I refresh the page, I don't see the warning again because I filter them basically. So it's better to have everything available so you'll get the notification for both warnings and errors and some info that we already have here. So what else? Oh, you can filter it as well. You can search for something. If I type for name, since this is the only name that I have here, it filtered it out for me. And that's all mostly about this tab. Let's go to the other tab. The other tab is elements. And what is this? It lays out all of the HTML tag that we have in this screen right here. So if I hover over it, you can see it highlights it for me. And I can just see what view element I have here. For example, if I want to find this input, I can just go here and find it right here and see if we can scroll down. There is one way of doing it. Another way that is an easier way is about this one. So if you click on this, select an element, this pointer, and I go here and click on it, it will highlight it right here. Then it says as this is the element that you're looking for. And I can change locally the attribute of this input. For example, I can change the placeholder, let's say special. I double clicked it and I changed it, and you can see immediately it got changed. I can change the style here, and it's very useful sometimes that you don't need to change the code and every time you save it and copy paste it here and re-render the application. You can just have the change right here. So for example, if I want to have some style, I can just say padding and say 10 pixel. And as you can see, as soon as I changed it, it changed the padding here, and I can just go up and it will change it live for me. And the same way you can just remove it by turning it on and off. So you can add class name, whatever class name that you want to add here, and you might get the style that you added for that class name. You can even add an element here. So for example, if you want to modify this div and add one more element, you can just right click on it and select edit as HTML here, this option, and it will give you the option that you can change and add one more element to your div. Not only one, you can just add as much as you want. That's very powerful to see your changes live and not go into the source code and change it. There are other stuff that you can see on the right hand side. These are basically the style part that based on the layer of application it adds to it. But the simple way that is sometimes, most of the time, is very useful is that you select the element, and if you want to apply any style to it, you can just click on it and then add the style right here. So it will apply the style. And one tip for this change is that if you see that change that you applied here, it doesn't reflect, it means that there's some override on the parent, and you should be careful what is overriding it. So that's another tip that you usually should watch. If you add some style here and you don't see on the view that it's applying, it means that there is some parent here that it's adding or rewriting on your style. So that's all about this view. And what's cool about searching here, if you want to search, for example, a class name, you can just do Command F, and you can just search by XPath or selector. So there's some selector in JavaScript that you can easily use. For example, I want to search for an element that starts with class name. And how do we search for class name? We usually put dot and the class name. So I put dot and passenger form. So it will show me all of the elements that uses passenger 4, and it says 1 out of 2. So I can just navigate between these two, and that's how we search for this view. What else we have? I think most of it we cover. And you can even delete an element here. For example, if I want to delete it, I can just say delete element, and it just completely delete the label. It doesn't change anything on your source code. So if I re-render and refresh the page, everything goes back to the normal, and my label will go back. So you should know that this is not changing the source code. This is just changing live on your application and getting the live feedback, what it will look like. So then yeah, as I said, you can just select any element by clicking on this selector, and then for example I clicked on the submit button and it will show me the button. Another thing that you can just change is the agent or the device that you can select with this element. So if I select this and I select the device, for example, I want to see how does my application look like in iPhone XR. So it will change it to iPhone XR size, and it will even show how it looks like when I tap on it. Or if I want to see how iPad, let me see if I have, yeah, iPad mini. So it will look like this in iPad mini. Or if I want to have some dimensions that I want to change and it's custom, I can just change it to this. And if I click it back again, it will remove the device type, and I can just go back to whatever Chrome is doing. So I usually put iPhone XR, and yeah, I can just deselect it and it will go back to Chrome, and I can just change the view size when I want. That's all about the Elements tab. Let's go to the next tab. That is very important. All of the tabs are very important, but this tab, since it shows our source code, it is very important. And let me yeah, okay. So in here you can open any source file that you have, and you can put breakpoint inside of your code. How do you open any file? You can just hold Command and P. This is what they're saying, that Command P. And I know that I have a home page, so I search for home page, and as you can see, it offers that home page is here, and this is my source code basically. So every time I can see my source code right here. Or if I want to see the source code for about page, I can just search for it, about page here, and it will show to the in a different tab. And I can put breakpoint on any line that I want. How do we put the breakpoint? By just simply on the line that we need, which can put we click on it and we'll add an arrow for us, and you can see if whenever we get to that line, it will stop. So in order to test it, I can just refresh the page and it will stop here. As you can see, the view got dimmed and it says, I'm here, what do you want to do? And at this point, I can just do exactly on the console that we were doing some stuff. So you can say whatever is available here, I want to check. For example, I want to see what is the context of it, or some of the variables like the props that I have. I want to see what is the props name value is. Currently the props name is name, and it's empty string. Or last name, what is the value of this at this level? So whatever I want to do, I can just monitor it here, and as soon as I am done, I have some options. I can just completely let it go and run the application, and it will go past this line. I can just hit this button and it will pass my breakpoint. But if I want to go one step ahead, if I rerun the application again, if I want to go only one line, I will go step over. It will go to the next line. So until I hit this one, it will go to the next line and next line and next line. These are about these two buttons. And for example, if you have multiple lines of breakpoints, and for example you want to disable all of them, but you don't want to remove them because later you need them, and that's for this button that you add here. So whenever I refresh the page, I want to say, okay, so from now on I want to disable all of the breakpoint that I have, and as you can see, how does it look like if it's disabled? So if I rerun the application, it will not stop here anymore because I disabled all of the breakpoints. But if I enable them back, it will again stop on my line. And that's this button is for. And this button is for the time that if we get error, it will automatically pause at that line of code. So currently I don't have any error inside of my application, but if I have some exceptions, this is very important and helpful whenever you have some exception on your code and you don't know which line of the code is it, which line is an issue. So you will turn this on, and then you rerun your application to that issue, and you will see it will. So for example here, so it seems like as soon as I refresh it, we get some error, and it stopped right here. It says that there is some exception and we need to take care of it. This is an internal thing, and that's why it stopped here. It stopped on our breakpoint and also the exceptions that we get. An exception means some error inside of our applications. So these are the very useful functions that we have here, and we have different tabs here. So if I zoom it in a little bit, you'll see. So we talked about this breakpoint. It shows all of the breakpoints that we have in our application right here. So I can just remove them like this, and the other one, or I can completely get rid of it by just unclick on it. So select or deselect. So you can, all of the breakpoints shows up here. We have another tab called watch. What is this watch? For example, on this point of the view on use effects or render, I want to see what is the value of one of my properties. So if I type something here, this function gets called, and I added a breakpoint here, that's why it stopped here, and I want to monitor this e value. And what is this e value, the target? So one way is just hover over e and I will see the value it's listed here, or another option is I can just simply type e here. This is the console that we have available here, and it will show me all of the value of e, and I can just navigate through this object by just simply click on it. The other way is that we add this e to the watch and say e dot target, and it will be much easier later, and you can use the dot notation to get the value. As you can see, I type s, and it's saying that e.target.value is s. Next time I go to this line, I don't need to hover over it to get the value. I can just watch it right here. So I type a, and as you can see, the watch value says SA. So that's the beauty of watch. Whatever you want to see, you can just see it right here. And yeah, we can let it go, and it will go like this. That's the watch tab. And what is the other one that I really like is the call stack. So what is the call stack? Let me type something. I say G, and now the call stack means that this function got called. Who called this function? We can just simply go through the stack and see who calls it. Most of the time it's internal things, but sometimes it's from your code. For example, you'll see that some other components calling your function. In this case, this is an internal thing. It goes to a file that is related to React, and we have not changed it. But sometimes it goes to our other view, and it's very handy to see who's calling this function. That's the main purpose of this call stack. And I think that's the most of the things that we use for this tab, which is the source. We have these 3 buttons that I want to confuse you. These are useful as well, but once you get more familiar with this tool, you can just learn how to use them. In order to activate this console at the bottom, because we said that console is here, we don't have it on the source, but if you hit escape button, you will see that it come and go by just hitting escape button. So you can activate it, and it's handy, as I said, when you want to both monitor the source code and the console at the same time. Okay, so that was all about the source. We have another tab which is called network, which is also important. It will monitor, let me let the breakpoint go. It will monitor all of the network tab, and it's important, for example, when you have some calls in your application that you want to monitor and see what is going on, what is the request, what is the response, and that is the tab. As you can see, I refresh the page, and if I go back to the network tab, and I'm filtering the only XSHR, but I can just unfilter it, and I can remove the console. So as you can see, there are some calls that is being made, and you can see the request and the response. Preview is for the request, and response is basically the response that we get. These are not HTTP requests. I don't have any HTTP requests on my application. We will learn more about it in our next season of the application for basically web development. It will come right after this tutorial. This tutorial will end on this episode, but we will soon start the new series that we will talk about more advanced development with React, and one of them is just adding the call or HTTP requests. We will use fetch, and if you use any kind of HTTP request or backend calls, it will write it here, and we can monitor what is the request, what is the response, what are the headers, and everything. So this tab is also very important to know, and that's all about it. Once we get to that tutorial, we'll more focus on this tab later, but just get familiar with it and know this tab exists for the network calls. The next tab that I would like to talk is about application tab. This tab is basically you can monitor all of the local storage and session storage, and also cookies. So if your application is adding any storage to your application, you can monitor the value right here. So if you have any kind of modification to the cookies of the application, you can see it right under the cookies. If you have any modification on the session, you will see it right under session, and if you have anything on the local storage, you can just see it under here. So this is a little bit for the time that you are modifying the store of Chrome, but I just wanted to let you know that this tab exists. Now the next tab that we want to talk is about components, but before that we need to know where we can get this tab, because by default it doesn't come with Chrome. But if you go to Google and search React Developer Tools or React Chrome extension, you will find this URL. I will add this URL to the description of this tutorial. So you can get your React extension. The icon is like this, and it will add an icon right here for you. So you will see an icon here like this, and then you can go back to your application and navigate to the Components tab. And what is this Component tab? It basically shows all of the React elements, React components. So it has its own selector. So if I select this and go back to this form, Since we use form control, it shows as a form control, and it is very important and it's very useful because when we go to elements, we don't see that. So if I select the same thing, it doesn't show the form control. Yeah, it adds as a class form control, but the layout, it's the tag, the actual HTML tag is input. That's the part that React convert. It converts the components that we define in our application in JSX. JSX is something that we defined in previous tutorial. If you have not watched it, I would definitely recommend that you watch, and convert it to HTML tag. So we can monitor our React components and see what are the props available to these components and the values related to them by just simply clicking on them. And this is very easy and handy when we want to look in for the components that we add to our application. And I think we briefly talked about Redux dev tools in Redux, React Redux. If you have not watched it, I would highly recommend to go back and watch React Redux. This is a very important part of the development in React. And that's the tab that we talked about, the state of the application. It will list all of the actions. For example, if I add any action here and go into the next view, if I have some Redux change, it will show that action right here. And if I have some state of the application, it will write on the state. And if by any action I change the state, I can just go to the diff tab and check the diff. That's all about debugging, and mostly if you know all of these things, you should be able to debug your application very easily. And we will talk about these debug tools later. We will use them as a source of truth later, and you should get familiar with these tabs and dev tools. We have some other browsers, dev tools like Safari, but I prefer to use this. Most of the powerful browsers like Safari and Chrome's, they mostly have the same features, but they might look different. But we'll learn the dev tools from Chrome. I hope you learned some stuff and good things for this tutorial. This season of the React development will finish, but I will soon start the new series, which is creating cool features with React and in JavaScript in general. So stay tuned, we will come back soon. Have a great day.